So let's take a look at the beard. Let's start by hiding the hair that we don't need. And let's check something. Normally, each hair solution handles subdivisions differently. Yeti by default uses the different rendering engine settings to decide if a mesh is to be treated as a subdivision. So let's first render the hair close up, and what I want to do is add a Lambert so that we can test that out. And let's set this to 0.1 so that the renders are a little quicker. Getting closer should inform us better about what we're seeing in the full frame render. And what I am noticing here is that the root of the hair is floating above the surface, which means that the geometry subdivides at render time. And it seems like the beard geometry is not. Once there's a Yeti node connection, Yeti adds attributes to the growth geo shape. So what we want to do is turn on Yeti subdivisions, and we can leave it to the default 2. Now let's render and see if it behaves any differently. Okay. So this is giving us better results. Now the root is making contact with the surface, whereas before it wasn't. So if we compare before, after, before, and after. So this is one problem solved. Now let's address the next note, which is sparsity. Right now it's looking a little sparse. So let's increase the density. We have this set to 2, so let's try 5. Okay. It's not looking super dense. I think this will work. Let's leave that at 5. Let's reapply the beard shader and render. Alright, so it's looking better. I am noticing some gray areas, and I'm assuming that is the reflection, so that's coming from the shader. So if we go to the V-Ray Next shader documentation, this shader does require some finesse, so you might want to explore the documentation to get a little bit more familiar with the V-Ray Next hair shader. So according to the documentation, the IOR is responsible for reflectivity, so let's drop that to 0.1. We want to add maybe a little bit of phomelanine, which will give it a little bit more of a reddish value and see what we get. Let's drop the glint, which is the color highlight. Glitter strength, let's drop this to 0.1 as well, and let's render. Okay, better. So let's compare. So we have before and after. Might want to kick up the IOR a little bit. Let's render and see how it's looking. So I think we could probably kick this to 1.25, 1.2. Now what I want to do, because right now the beard's looking a little bit fuller than we want it to, we're going for a 5 o'clock shadow. What I'm going to do is go back to the grow node and drop the length multiplier to 0.025, so half of what we have currently, math. So now let's see before and after, which I think is much more successful. Now let's bring back the rest of the hair, drop this back down to 0.01 and render. And here we are. So it's looking, in my opinion, a lot better. So let's look back at where we were several renders ago. So this is where we were This is where we are now. Looking pretty sweet. Now that that's taken care of, let's switch gears and talk about how to set up a Groom network for animation.